They say when you stare into the abyss, it stares back. But what happens when the abyss blinks first? For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council ruled through fear. Their enforcers, the dreaded Vorthak, were unstoppable killing machines that could tear through entire star systems. Worlds surrendered at the mere mention of their name. Civilizations paid tribute rather than face extinction. Then they made one critical mistake. They demanded Earth provide warriors for their ranks. What they got instead was something far worse than they ever imagined. Something that made their most feared predators look like helpless prey. Something that would hunt them across the galaxy until there was nowhere left to hide. The Council wanted soldiers. Humanity gave them nightmares. Welcome to the story of how Earth's forgotten children became the galaxy's most terrifying legend. Admiral Cathvar of the Galactic Council stood before the massive view screen in his flagship's command center, watching the blue-green marble that the inhabitants called Earth slowly rotate beneath them. His forearms crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of authority, while his compound eyes studied the preliminary reports floating holographically before him. "Such a primitive world," he muttered to his aide. "Commander Zelix. No interstellar travel. No energy weapons. Still using chemical propulsion. How did they even achieve spaceflight?" Zelix's tentacles writhed nervously as he consulted his datapad. "Their technological development appears highly inconsistent, Admiral. They have primitive computers yet sophisticated metallurgy. They fight with projectile weapons but have split the atom. Most curious of all, they seem to fight constantly among themselves." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. Perfect. A world of natural warriors already conditioned for conflict. "The Council will be pleased." He turned to face the communication array. "Open a channel to the surface. All frequencies. Call." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's quantum engines. Across Earth's surface, every television, radio, and communication device suddenly crackled to life with the same message, broadcast in every human language simultaneously. "People of Earth," Admiral Cathvar's voice boomed across the planet. "I am Admiral Cathvar of the Galactic Council, representing the united civilizations of this galaxy. You are hereby informed that your world has been selected to provide military forces for the Council's Enforcement Division. In living rooms and military command centers, in bustling cities and remote villages, 7 billion humans stopped what they were doing and listened to words that would change everything. Your species demonstrates the aggressive tendencies and combat potential required for Council service. You will provide 1 million of your finest warriors immediately. Failure to comply will result in the complete sterilization of your planet. You have 72 hours to respond." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. At the Pentagon, General Patricia Morrison stared at the blank screens for a full 30 seconds before the chaos erupted. Every phone in the building began ringing simultaneously. Similar scenes played out in military headquarters across the globe as humanity's leaders tried to process what they had just heard. "Sir," Morrison's aide burst through her office door without knocking. "We're getting reports of massive ships in orbit. The space station confirms visual contact with at least 50 vessels, each one the size of Manhattan." Morrison pulled up the satellite feeds on her secure terminal. The ships hung in perfect formation above Earth like metallic predators, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. Each vessel bristled with weapons that made Earth's most advanced military technology look like stone tools. "Get me the president," she ordered. "And someone find out if anyone else on this planet has been dealing with aliens without telling us." Across the Atlantic in a secure bunker beneath London, Prime Minister Harrison was having similar thoughts as he watched the same feeds. The emergency session of Parliament had devolved into shouting matches about whether this was an elaborate hoax, a terrorist attack, or the end of civilization as they knew it. "What do we know about their capabilities?" Harrison asked his defense secretary. "Nothing good, Prime Minister. Our best estimates suggest those ships could glass the entire surface of the planet without breaking formation. The energy readings we're detecting are off any scale we have. In Moscow, Beijing, and every other capital city, similar conversations were taking place. Humanity's fractured leadership faced the same terrifying reality: comply or die. But while politicians debated and generals planned, something else was happening in the darker corners of Earth's military establishments, in black sites and classified facilities, in the offices of special operations commanders and intelligence directors. A different kind of conversation was taking place. Colonel Marcus Kane sat in his windowless office 3 levels below the Pentagon, reading through personnel files that officially didn't exist. As the director of the Department of Advanced Threat Response, Kane had spent 15 years preparing for scenarios that most people couldn't imagine. Alien invasion had been on that list. Pull together Phoenix, Ghost, and Reaper protocols, he told his deputy, Major Sarah Chen. Authorization Black 7. Chen's expression didn't change, but Kane saw her pupils dilate slightly. Black 7 meant the gloves were off. Everything was permitted. All of them, sir? Every single program, every asset, every resource we've been saving for the impossible scenario. Kane leaned back in his chair. Looks like impossible just became Tuesday. Meanwhile, aboard the Council flagship, Admiral Kethvar was reviewing reports from his fleet's sensors. The humans' military capabilities were even more primitive than initial scans had suggested. Their most powerful weapons were barely capable of reaching orbit, let alone threatening his ships. Admiral, Commander Zelix approached with obvious excitement. The preliminary biological scans are complete. The humans appear to be pursuit predators, Admiral. Endurance hunters. Kethvar's compound eyes focused on his aide. In 3,000 years of Council expansion, they had encountered only a handful of pursuit predator species, and those had required careful handling even after recruitment. Pursuit predators never stopped hunting their prey. They would track targets across continents through years of patient stalking, never giving up until their quarry was brought down. Fascinating. No wonder they fight so constantly. Their entire evolution has prepared them for warfare. The Admiral's mandibles clicked approvingly. The Vorthak will have excellent new recruits. The Vorthak were the Council's primary enforcement arm, a collection of the galaxy's most lethal species. For 3 millennia, the mere mention of their name had been enough to keep rebellious worlds in line. They were ambush predators, pack hunters, living weapons bred for violence. They had never failed to break a world's resistance. Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from the planet's surface, the communications officer reported. Multiple sources all requesting negotiations. Patch them through to the main screen. President Elizabeth Warren appeared on the view screen, flanked by the leaders of Earth's major powers. Behind them, the flags of a dozen nations created a backdrop of human authority that meant nothing to the beings watching from orbit. Admiral Kethvar, the president began, her voice steady despite the impossible circumstances. We've received your demands. Before we can respond, we need to understand exactly what you're asking for. The Admiral's translator rendered his amusement into human expressions. There is nothing to understand, human leader. Your species will provide 1 million warriors for Council service. They will serve for a period of 1 standard galactic year, during which time they will help maintain order throughout our territory. This is not a negotiation. What you're asking for is slavery. President Warren replied firmly. We cannot and will not simply hand over 1 million of our people. Then you choose extinction. The Admiral gestured to his weapons officer. Demonstrate our resolve. Target the city they call Los Angeles. The weapons officer hesitated. Admiral, our orders were to recruit, not destroy. A demonstration will expedite recruitment. Kethvar's tone brooked no argument. Aboard the Earth monitoring station, humanity watched in horror as one of the alien ships began to glow with an ominous energy. Then, just as the weapon reached full charge, alarms began blaring throughout the Council fleet. Admiral, the tactical officer called out. We're detecting massive energy spikes from the planet's surface. Multiple launch signatures. They're firing on us. On the main screen, dozens of bright streaks were climbing through Earth's atmosphere toward the Council ships. The Admiral stared in disbelief. The humans were actually attacking vessels that could annihilate their entire planet. Impossible. Our scans showed no weapons capable of reaching orbit. The first impact struck the lead destroyer with a series of brilliant flashes. When the energy dissipated, the ship was still intact, but clearly damaged, its shields flickering and hull scored with impact craters. Report, Kethvar demanded. Crude kinetic projectiles, Admiral, but traveling at significant fractions of light speed. Primitive railgun technology, but effective at these ranges. Shields are holding but taking damage. More missiles were launching from hidden sites across Earth's surface. Not enough to threaten the fleet, but enough to prove that humanity was not going to surrender without a fight. In his underground command center, Colonel Kane watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The railgun platforms had been humanity's most classified weapons project, designed to take out incoming asteroids or, in worst-case scenarios, attacking spacecraft. They had exactly 12 functioning platforms and maybe 200 rounds total. Effect on target? He asked. Minimal but measurable. Their shields can absorb the impact, but it's costing them power. More importantly, we've got their attention. Kane nodded. The attack wasn't meant to win a war. It was meant to send a message. Humans don't surrender easily. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Kefar studied the tactical readouts with growing interest rather than anger. The humans had hidden weapons that their initial scans had missed. More intriguingly, they had chosen to fight rather than negotiate, even against impossible odds. Admiral, incoming transmission from the surface. President Warren's image reappeared, but this time she was alone, and her expression had hardened into something that made even the Admiral take notice. Admiral Kefar, you wanted to see what human warriors look like. You just got a small taste. We have approximately 37,000 platforms like those hidden across our planet, along with weapon systems you haven't detected yet. We cannot win a direct confrontation with your fleet, and we know it. But we can make occupying our world cost you far more than it's worth. The Admiral leaned forward. The human leader was bluffing about the number of weapons, but her willingness to fight was genuine. More interesting still was the calculation behind her words. She wasn't threatening destruction. She was negotiating from a position of demonstrated strength. What are you proposing, human? A compromise. You want warriors? We'll give you volunteers. But they go as representatives of Earth, not as slaves. They maintain their human identity and serve for a limited term. In return, Earth maintains its independence and receives access to galactic technology and trade. Kefar considered this. The Council had been expanding for 3,000 years, always by conquest or coercion. But this species was offering something different, not submission, but partnership. It was unprecedented. The Council does not negotiate with primitive species, he said finally. Then the Council is about to learn what it costs to fight one, Warren replied without flinching. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Commander Zelix approached cautiously. Admiral, perhaps we should report this development to the High Council before proceeding. Kefar studied the blue world below, its surface now bristling with hidden threats, and its leaders proving to be far more complex than initial assessments had suggested. The humans had managed something no species had accomplished in 3 millennia. They had surprised him. No, he said finally. This world offers something the Council has never encountered. True warriors who choose to fight rather than being compelled to do so. Begin negotiations. The course of galactic history had just shifted, though none of the participants yet understood how dramatically. The Council had come to Earth seeking soldiers and found something far more dangerous. Humans who refused to kneel and possessed the capability to make that refusal stick. In war rooms across Earth, military planners were already preparing for the next phase of what historians would later call First Contact. They had bought time with a show of force, but the real test was yet to come. The aliens wanted warriors, and Earth was about to show them exactly what human warriors were capable of. Colonel Kane closed the tactical reports and opened a different set of files. If Earth was going to send representatives to the galactic community, they needed to be more than just soldiers. They needed to be something the galaxy had never seen before. They needed to be human. 3 weeks had passed since the negotiations began, and the Council flagship's conference room had become an unlikely meeting ground between species. Admiral Kefar found himself increasingly intrigued by the human delegation, though he would never admit it to his subordinates. The humans had arrived with detailed proposals, technical specifications, and what they called terms of engagement. Most alien species simply cowered and accepted Council demands. These humans acted like they were negotiating a business contract. The volunteers will serve 18-month rotations, General Morrison was explaining, her voice steady as she outlined humanity's position. They will maintain Earth military rank and protocol, and they will return home for debriefing and rotation. Non-negotiable. Commander Zelix's tentacles writhed in agitation. Preposterous. Council enforcement units serve until death or incapacitation. These are warriors, not tourists. These are human warriors, Morrison replied coolly. And human warriors fight better when they have something to return to. You want effective soldiers? Then you take them on our terms. Kefar studied the human general with his compound eyes. Her species biology fascinated him. Unlike most galactic races, humans showed no visible signs of fear in his presence. Their heart rates remained steady, their posture confident. After 3 weeks of negotiations, he had begun to suspect this was not because they were too primitive to understand the danger, but because they genuinely weren't intimidated. Tell me about your selection process, the Admiral requested. Morrison activated a holographic display that showed statistics and profiles. We're not sending you random soldiers, Admiral. These will be volunteers from our most elite units. Special forces, intelligence operatives, combat veterans with specialized skills. Each volunteer undergoes additional screening and training specifically for galactic service.
What kind of additional training?
Zelix asked suspiciously. cultural integration, xenobiology basics, advanced combat techniques, and what we call diplomatic warfare. Morrison's slight smile suggested layers of meaning that weren't being fully explained. In the weeks since first contact, Earth's black sites had been working around the clock. The volunteer program was real, but it was also cover for something far more complex. Every human selected for galactic service would be trained in intelligence gathering, sabotage, psychological warfare, and a dozen other skills that had nothing to do with conventional combat. "Show them the demonstration," Morrison said to her aide. The holographic display shifted to show a training facility where humans were practicing combat techniques. But these weren't the martial arts or weapon drills the Council expected. Instead, they watched humans learning to fight in zero gravity, adapting their tactics to different atmospheric compositions, and most importantly, studying videos of various alien species to understand their weaknesses. "Impressive, but unnecessary," Cathvar commented. "Council enforcement operates primarily against rebellious populations. Raw aggression is typically sufficient." Morrison's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested the Admiral had just revealed more than he intended. "Of course, our volunteers will be ready for any assignment." Meanwhile, 3 levels below the Pentagon, Colonel Kane was conducting a very different kind of briefing. The volunteers gathered in the secure conference room represented the deadliest human beings on the planet, each one hand-picked, not just for their combat skills, but for their intelligence, adaptability, and psychological profiles. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear does not leave this room," Kane began. "The volunteer program is real. You will be serving with alien forces, and you will be representing humanity. But that's only part of your mission." Staff Sergeant Diana Reyes, formerly of Delta Force, leaned forward. "What's the other part, sir?" "Intelligence gathering. The Council has been expanding across the galaxy for 3,000 years. They've conquered or coerced hundreds of species. We need to know how they operate, what their weaknesses are, and what other civilizations might be willing to work with us." Captain James Chen, Navy SEAL, raised his hand. "Are we talking about espionage, sir?" "We're talking about survival," Kane replied bluntly. "Right now, Earth is a curiosity to them. We managed to surprise them once, and they're intrigued enough to negotiate instead of simply destroying us. But that situation won't last forever. Eventually, they'll either decide we're useful enough to keep around, or dangerous enough to eliminate." Master Chief Paula Rodriguez, Force Recon, spoke up. "So our job is to make ourselves indispensable." "Exactly. But more than that, we need to understand their power structure, their technology, their military capabilities, and their enemies. Because I guarantee you, in a galaxy this size, the Council has enemies." Kane activated a classified display showing psychological profiles of the aliens they had encountered so far. The Admiral and his crew are professional soldiers, but they're also representatives of a system that's never faced real opposition. They think in terms of overwhelming force and intimidation. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness. The volunteers studied the data with the focused attention of people whose lives would depend on understanding it. These were humans who had spent their careers learning to fight smarter rather than harder, and they were already beginning to see opportunities. "What's our communications protocol?" Reyes asked. "Standard diplomatic channels will be monitored and censored. But we'll have other methods." Kane smiled grimly. "The Council has never dealt with humans before. They have no idea what we're capable of when we put our minds to it." Back aboard the flagship, Admiral Cathvar was receiving his own briefing from the fleet's science officer. The data on human biology and psychology had taken weeks to compile, and the results were disturbing. "Admiral, I must recommend extreme caution in deploying these humans," Science Commander Thyrix warned. "Their psychological profiles are unlike anything in Council databases." "Explain." "Most species respond to stress and danger with either fight or flight responses. Humans appear to have a third response, adaptation. They don't just fight or flee. They learn, plan, and modify their approach. Worse, they seem to actually become more effective under extreme stress." Cathvar reviewed the data himself. The humans they had observed during negotiations had shown remarkable composure for a species facing potential extinction. Rather than panic or despair, they had immediately begun planning and adapting. Furthermore, Admiral, their pack bonding mechanisms are extraordinary. They form emotional attachments not just to their own species, but to abstract concepts, ideologies, and even individuals of other species. This could make them unpredictable in multi-species operations. Are you suggesting they might be unreliable? I'm suggesting they might be too reliable, Admiral. If a human forms what they call loyalty to a non-council entity, they have demonstrated willingness to fight to the death for that attachment. Their history is filled with examples of humans choosing death over betraying those they consider part of their pack. Kethvar pondered this. The Council's enforcement arm worked because most species feared death more than they valued freedom. If humans were willing to die for abstract principles, conventional intimidation might prove ineffective. There's more, Admiral. Analysis of their historical conflicts reveals tactical innovations that suggest extremely rapid adaptation to new threats. They don't just fight, they evolve their fighting techniques in real time. The Admiral dismissed the science officer and sat alone in his quarters, staring at the blue world below. The humans had presented him with a puzzle unlike any he had encountered in 40 years of service. They claimed to want peaceful coexistence, but they had also demonstrated the ability to damage council ships. They offered volunteers for service, but those volunteers came with conditions no other species had ever dared to demand. More troubling still, they seemed genuinely unafraid. Not because they didn't understand the danger, but because they had already accepted it and moved on to planning their response. His communication console chimed with an incoming message from the Council High Command. Admiral Kethvar read the orders with growing unease. The High Council had reviewed the situation and made their decision: accept the human volunteers, but use them to test a new enforcement strategy. Rather than simply maintaining order on conquered worlds, the humans would be deployed to actively expand Council territory. The orders were clear. The humans would serve as the vanguard for an assault on the Kepler Resistance, a coalition of species that had managed to maintain independence for over 2 centuries. If the humans proved effective, they would be used for similar operations throughout the galaxy. If they proved unreliable or ineffective, they would be eliminated along with their homeworld. Kethvar realized that he had inadvertently placed both species in an impossible position. The humans had negotiated for limited service, but the Council intended to use them as expendable shock troops. If they succeeded, they would be responsible for destroying the galaxy's last free peoples. If they failed, their own world would pay the price. He found himself in the unusual position of hoping that a species he barely understood would somehow find a third option. On Earth, the selected volunteers were completing their final preparations. Each one carried equipment that officially didn't exist, training that went far beyond what they had disclosed to their alien hosts, and orders that would have shocked even their own governments. Staff Sergeant Reyes stood in her quarters reviewing the mission parameters one final time. Tomorrow, she and 49 other humans would board Council transport vessels and begin their integration into alien military units. On the surface, they were representing Earth's cooperation with galactic civilization. In reality, they were humanity's first steps toward either liberation or destruction. The volunteers had been chosen not just for their combat skills, but for their ability to think independently, adapt quickly, and survive in impossible circumstances. Each one was, in essence, a one-person intelligence agency trained to appear as a simple soldier. As the transport ships prepared for departure, neither species fully understood what they had set in motion. The Council believed they were gaining useful shock troops. Humanity believed they were buying time and gathering intelligence. The group realized that they had just created the conditions for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The volunteers would serve with honor, fight with courage, and represent their species with distinction. They would also observe, learn, plan, and gradually begin to understand that the galaxy's balance of power was far more fragile than anyone imagined. In 18 months, when their first rotation returned to Earth, they would bring with them knowledge that would change everything. Knowledge about Council weaknesses, resistance movements, and opportunities that no one had foreseen. The galaxy had demanded warriors from humanity, and humanity had delivered. But they had also delivered something far more dangerous. Human intelligence turned toward the problem of survival in a hostile universe. The war for galactic freedom was about to begin, though none of the participants yet realized it. The Kepler Resistance had held their territory for 237 years, a feat that many in the galaxy considered impossible. Now, Staff Sergeant Diana Reyes crouched behind a crystalline barrier on the contested moon of Zirion. 7. Watching Council forces prepare for what their commanders promised would be the final assault. 6 months had passed since the first human volunteers had been integrated into Council enforcement units, and the results had surprised everyone. The humans adapted to alien combat environments with disturbing ease, learned new weapon systems faster than any species on record, and most importantly, they won battles that the Council had expected to lose. Reyes, report. Came the voice of Vorthak Commander Zektar through her translator unit. The towering reptilian officer stood 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and claws that could shred metal. Like most Council species, he had initially viewed the humans as weak, soft creatures suited only for cannon fodder. That assessment had changed during their first joint operation. Sir, I count 47 defensive positions, integrated sensor arrays, and what appears to be a command bunker built into the cliff face. Reyes replied, studying the resistance stronghold through her enhanced optics. Conventional assault would cost us 60% casualties minimum. The Vorthak's head tilted in a gesture Reyes had learned indicated confusion. Acceptable losses.
We attack at dawn. Sir, with respect, I'd like to propose an alternative approach.
For 6 months, Reyes and the other human volunteers had been carefully demonstrating their capabilities.
Not their full capabilities, but enough to establish credibility and gain operational input. The key was to appear useful without appearing threatening. Explain your alternative, human. Reyes activated her tactical display, showing the resistance base from multiple angles. The Kepler fighters are defending against conventional assault patterns, but they've never fought humans before. We use different tactics. What she didn't mention was that the different tactics were based on detailed intelligence the human volunteers had been gathering about resistance capabilities, council weaknesses, and the overall strategic situation. Every human in the volunteer program was part of a careful intelligence operation that had mapped the galaxy's power structure in ways the council never suspected. Sir, if we could get a small team inside their sensor perimeter, we could disable their early warning systems and communication arrays. The main assault would face minimal organized resistance. Zektar's massive head swiveled to study the human soldier. In 6 months of joint operations, the humans had proven themselves capable of impossible infiltrations, precision strikes, and tactical innovations that consistently outperformed Council expectations. More disturbing still, they seemed to genuinely care about minimizing casualties on both sides. How would you penetrate their defenses? Leave that to us, sir. My team specializes in impossible infiltrations. What Reyes didn't explain was that her team included specialists Morrison and Chen, who had spent the past 6 months secretly establishing contact with resistance intelligence networks. The humans weren't planning to destroy the resistance. They were planning to coordinate with them. 12 hours later, Reyes and her team moved through the broken terrain surrounding the resistance base, using stealth technology that officially didn't exist and tactics that the Council had never seen. Their mission parameters were simple: disable the sensor arrays and open a path for the main assault. Their actual mission was far more complex. Contact established, whispered Specialist Chen through their private communication network. Unlike the standard Council equipment, the humans carried communication gear that was undetectable to both Council and Resistance monitoring systems. Resistance leadership is willing to discuss terms. The Resistance had been expecting a typical Council assault: overwhelming force, mass casualties, and eventual capitulation or extinction. They had not been expecting humans who could penetrate their defenses and then request a meeting. Commander Valtara of the Kepler Resistance studied the 3 humans sitting across from her, in the hidden chamber, deep within their base. They had appeared without warning, bypassed every security measure her people possessed, and then politely requested negotiations instead of attacking. You claim to represent Earth interests, not Council interests, Valtara said carefully. Yet you serve in Council forces. We serve with Council forces, Reyes corrected. There's a difference. Our mission is to protect Earth's independence and gather intelligence about galactic power structures. That mission sometimes aligns with Council objectives, and sometimes it doesn't. What are you proposing? Chen leaned forward.
A staged defeat.
Your forces withdraw from this position, but in a way that provides intelligence about Council tactical weaknesses. We gather data on their assault patterns, communication protocols, and strategic planning. Everyone survives, and the Resistance gains information that could be useful in future engagements. Valtahara's 4 eyes narrowed. And what does Earth gain from this arrangement? Allies, Morrison replied simply. The Council has been expanding for 3,000 years. Eventually, they'll decide that Earth is either too useful to remain independent or too dangerous to leave alive. When that happens, we want friends who understand what it means to fight for freedom. The Resistance commander studied the humans for a long moment. Their species had been fighting the Council for over 2 centuries, and in that time, they had never encountered anything like these strange mammals. Most Council species fought from instinct or conditioning. These humans fought from calculation and choice. Show me your plan. Back at the Council staging area, Commander Zektar watched his tactical displays with growing excitement. The human infiltrators had successfully disabled the Resistance sensor network and were now providing real-time intelligence on defensive positions. The upcoming assault would be a textbook example of Council superiority. He did not realize that every piece of intelligence being provided was carefully crafted to achieve specific objectives that had nothing to do with Council victory. "Sir, the humans report that the Resistance command structure appears to be fragmenting," reported his intelligence officer. "They're detecting multiple groups withdrawing to separate positions." "Excellent. Divided enemies are defeated enemies." What Zektar was actually seeing was a carefully orchestrated withdrawal that would allow the Resistance leadership to escape while providing the Council with a symbolic victory. The humans had spent 6 months learning Council tactical priorities and psychological patterns. They knew exactly what kind of victory would satisfy their commanders without actually destroying the Resistance. The assault began at dawn, just as planned. Council forces moved forward with overwhelming firepower, encountering sporadic resistance that gradually crumbled under sustained attack. By noon, they had captured the Resistance base and taken several dozen prisoners. "Exceptional work, humans." Zektar congratulated Reyes and her team. "Your infiltration techniques proved decisive." "Thank you, sir. We're honored to serve the Council's interests." But while the Council celebrated their victory, a different kind of operation was taking place across the galaxy. The human volunteers had been serving with dozens of different Council units, gathering intelligence and establishing contacts with resistance groups, independent species, and even dissatisfied Council members. The information they collected was being compiled into a comprehensive analysis of galactic power structures, military capabilities, and potential pressure points. More importantly, they were beginning to map out what a coordinated resistance effort might look like. Captain Sarah Kim, serving with a Council patrol unit in the Outer Rim, had just completed her own intelligence-gathering mission. The sector she was monitoring contained 17 independent systems that had so far avoided Council attention through isolation and careful neutrality. Kim to base, she transmitted through encrypted channels that appeared to be standard patrol reports. Harvesting mission complete. Yield exceeded expectations. The message, when decoded by intelligence analysts on Earth, contained detailed specifications for Council ship designs, command protocols, and strategic priorities. But more importantly, it contained contact information for resistance cells in systems the Council considered secure. Master Chief Rodriguez, operating with a Council garrison force, had made an even more significant discovery. The troops under her command included members of species that had been forcibly recruited into Council service, and many of them were far less loyal than their commanders believed. "These aren't willing soldiers," she reported during a coded communication. "They're conscripts, hostages, and slaves. Half the Council's military could be turned against them with the right approach." The intelligence picture emerging from 6 months of human operations was staggering. The Council appeared overwhelmingly powerful from the outside, but their empire was riddled with internal contradictions, unwilling participants, and suppressed resistance movements. Back on Earth, Colonel Kane studied the compiled reports with growing excitement and concern. The volunteer program had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations in terms of intelligence gathering, but it had also revealed the true scope of the challenge facing humanity. "Sir," Major Chen entered his office with the latest analysis. "The picture is becoming clearer. The Council maintains control through a combination of technological superiority, overwhelming force, and careful management of information. But their empire is far less stable than it appears." Kane reviewed the summary documents. "What's our assessment of their response to coordinated resistance?" "They've never faced it, sir. For 3,000 years, they've dealt with individual worlds or small coalitions. The idea of galaxy-wide coordination is outside their experience base, and our volunteers, performing better than expected. Council commanders are beginning to request human units specifically for difficult assignments. We're becoming indispensable." Kane nodded grimly. "Which means we're also becoming a threat. How long before they realize what we're actually doing?" "Unknown, sir. But we're recommending acceleration of Phase 2. Phase 2 involved something that would have shocked even the human volunteers. Direct contact with the galaxy's most dangerous resistance movements, sharing of Earth's technological innovations, and the beginning of a coordinated effort to undermine Council authority throughout their territory." Meanwhile, aboard Admiral Cathvar's flagship, the Admiral was reviewing reports from dozens of operations involving human volunteers. The results were uniformly positive. Human units suffered lower casualties, completed missions faster, and demonstrated tactical innovations that other Council species couldn't replicate. But the Admiral was beginning to notice patterns that troubled him. Human volunteers always seemed to have detailed intelligence about their targets. They showed unusual concern for minimizing civilian casualties. And most disturbing of all, they asked questions about Council operations that went far beyond tactical necessity. "Commander Zelix," Have you noticed anything unusual about the human volunteers? Sir, they are remarkably effective. Perhaps too effective. Explain. Admiral, in 3,000 years of Council expansion, we have never encountered a species that adapted to our methods so quickly. Most races require decades of integration before they understand our objectives and tactics. The humans seem to have grasped them almost immediately. HFY pulled up tactical reports from the past 6 months. The humans had participated in 17 major operations and scored victories in all of them. More significantly, they had done so while maintaining the lowest casualty rates in Council military history. Are you suggesting they're hiding something? I'm suggesting they're learning something, Admiral. Every operation provides them with more information about our capabilities, our strategies, and our priorities. The question is what they plan to do with that information. The Admiral stared at the tactical displays, seeing the data in a new light. The humans had positioned themselves as indispensable allies while systematically gathering intelligence about every aspect of Council operations. If they were actually working against Council interests, they were doing so with a sophistication that no other species had ever demonstrated. Double the security protocols around human personnel, he ordered, and begin discreet monitoring of their communications. Yes, sir. But HFY suspected it might already be too late. If the humans were planning something, they had been given 6 months to establish contacts, gather intelligence, and position assets throughout Council territory. They had used their time well. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity decided to stop being diplomatic. The encrypted message reached Earth 12 hours after the Council began monitoring human communications. By then, it was far too late to stop what Colonel Kane had set in motion. Phoenix Protocol is active. The message read through 17 layers of encryption that made it appear to be routine supply requests. Assets in position. Recommend immediate implementation of Prometheus. Kane stood before a wall-sized display showing the positions of human volunteers throughout Council territory. 49 individuals scattered across dozens of systems, each one having spent 8 months learning everything possible about Council operations, while appearing to be loyal soldiers. Prometheus's authorization to begin active measures, he explained to the Joint Chiefs who had gathered for the classified briefing. Our people have identified critical vulnerabilities in Council command and control systems. More importantly, they've established contact with resistance networks throughout their territory. General Morrison leaned forward. What kind of active measures? Coordinated strikes against Council infrastructure, simultaneous uprisings in key systems, and the introduction of technological capabilities they've never encountered. Kane activated new displays showing weapon specifications and tactical plans. We've learned that the Council has never faced an enemy that could match their technological advantages. They win through superior firepower and coordination. Take those away and their empire becomes very fragile. Sir, Admiral Hayes interjected. This sounds like we're planning to start an interstellar war. Admiral, we've been in an interstellar war since the moment their ships entered our system. The only question is whether we're going to fight it on their terms or our terms. The plan was elegant in its complexity. Human volunteers had spent months identifying the critical communication nodes that coordinated Council operations across their territory. Simultaneously striking these nodes would fragment their command structure and prevent coordinated response to resistance activities. But the real stroke of genius was the technology package that Earth was preparing to introduce to the galaxy. Show them the equalizer, Kane ordered. The display shifted to show technical specifications for devices that looked deceptively simple. Portable quantum communication arrays that could instantly connect resistant cells across galactic distances. Stealth technology that made Council sensors useless. And most importantly, manufacturing templates for weapons that could penetrate Council shields and armor. Where did we get this technology? Admiral Hayes asked. We developed it, Kane replied. Turns out that 3,000 years of unopposed expansion makes you complacent about technological innovation. The Council has been using essentially the same weapons and defensive systems for centuries. Human engineers have been improving on those designs since we first saw them. What Kane didn't explain was that the technology development had been facilitated by intelligence provided by the volunteers. Detailed analysis of captured Council equipment and assistance from sympathetic alien scientists who had been secretly working with the Resistance for decades. Meanwhile, aboard a Council patrol vessel in the Rigel sector, Staff Sergeant Diana Reyes was making final preparations for operations that would change galactic history. Her official assignment was to investigate possible smuggling activities in an apparently peaceful star system. Her actual mission was to establish the first human contact with the Altarian Republic, the largest independent confederation remaining in the galaxy. Reyes, your infiltration skills will be crucial for this operation. Commander Zektar briefed her. The smugglers are using Altarian space to avoid Council jurisdiction. We need evidence of their activities to justify intervention. Understood, sir. I'll gather the necessary evidence. What Zektar didn't know was that the smugglers were actually human agents who had been delivering advanced technology to Altarian resistance networks for the past month. The evidence Reyes would gather would indeed justify intervention, but not the kind the Council was expecting. Reyes made her way to the shuttle bay, carrying equipment that the Council believed was standard reconnaissance gear. In reality, her pack contained quantum communicators, shield-penetrating weapons, and manufacturing templates that would allow the Altarians to begin producing their own advanced defense systems. Reyes to base, beginning infiltration mission, she transmitted on standard Council frequencies. Phoenix lead to all Phoenix assets, came the response on quantum channels that the Council couldn't detect. Prometheus is active. Execute your missions. Across the galaxy, in dozens of systems, human volunteers began implementing plans they had been developing for months. The operations were coordinated to begin simultaneously, preventing the Council from responding effectively to any single action. Captain James Chen, serving with a Council garrison on the industrial world of Nexus Prime, was about to introduce the garrison to human-modified explosives. The planet's manufacturing facilities produced 60% of the Council's advanced weapon systems, making it a critical strategic target. Sir, I've identified security vulnerabilities in the manufacturing complex, he reported to his commanding officer. Recommend immediate inspection of the primary assembly areas. The inspection would provide cover for Chen to place explosive devices that would appear to be industrial accidents but would actually disable production for months. More importantly, the explosions would mask the insertion of human agents who would begin organizing the planet's conscripted workforce. Master Chief Rodriguez, stationed with a Council fleet in the contested border regions, was about to demonstrate what human boarding tactics could accomplish against unprepared enemies. Her target was the fleet's command vessel, where she would install monitoring equipment that would allow resistance forces to intercept Council strategic communications. Rodriguez to Tactical, requesting permission to conduct combat readiness drill with boarding teams, she transmitted. Permission granted, Master Chief. Use live scenarios. The live scenarios would involve Rodriguez and her human-trained boarding teams taking temporary control of critical ship systems while appearing to conduct routine training. By the time the drill was complete, every major Council fleet in the sector would be compromised. But the most significant operation was taking place on Earth itself, where Colonel Kane was about to implement the most dangerous part of Prometheus Protocol. Open a channel to the Council flagship, he ordered. Admiral Kethvar's face appeared on the communication screen, his compound eyes reflecting suspicion and growing alarm. The monitoring systems had detected unusual communication patterns from human forces, and several critical facilities had reported equipment malfunctions that were suspiciously timed. Colonel Kane, we need to discuss irregularities in your volunteers' activities.
Admiral, I was about to contact you about the same issue, Kane replied smoothly.
We've detected unauthorized communications and activities among Council forces that suggest a security breach. Explain. Our intelligence indicates that resistance elements have infiltrated Council command structures. We have evidence of coordinated sabotage activities planned against critical installations. Kane transmitted a carefully prepared intelligence package that contained genuine information about resistance activities, but framed to suggest that the threat came from traditional resistance movements rather than human-coordinated operations.
Admiral, with respect, your security protocols were designed to detect conventional infiltration.
But the resistance has evolved beyond your defensive capabilities. They're using technologies and tactics that didn't exist when your procedures were established. Kefar studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The data showed coordination between resistance cells that should have been impossible, technological capabilities that exceeded anything in Council databases, and most disturbing of all, operational security that had prevented detection until attacks were already underway. What are you recommending? Joint Human Council task forces to hunt down the resistance leadership. Our personnel have demonstrated superior counterinsurgency capabilities. Give us operational authority, and we'll locate and eliminate the threat. It was a masterpiece of misdirection. Kane was offering to solve the very problem that humanity had created, while positioning human forces as the Council's most trusted allies. The plan would give human operatives unrestricted access to Council intelligence networks and operational authority throughout their territory. Admiral, Kane continued, we're also prepared to share advanced counterinsurgency technologies that Earth has developed. Our analysis suggests that conventional council responses will be insufficient against this new threat. What kind of technologies? Kane transmitted technical specifications for devices that appeared to be advanced surveillance and tracking systems. In reality, they were Trojan horses that would compromise council security networks while appearing to strengthen them. Admiral Kefar found himself facing a decision that would determine the future of council control. Accept human assistance and risk giving them too much access to critical systems, or decline and face a coordinated resistance that appeared to have capabilities beyond anything they had previously encountered. We accept your recommendations, Colonel. Human forces are hereby granted emergency operational authority for counter-insurgency operations. Kane suppressed a smile. Thank you, Admiral. We won't disappoint you. Across the galaxy, human volunteers received new orders through quantum channels. They were now officially authorized to investigate and neutralize threats to Council security. The irony was not lost on any of them. Staff Sergeant Reyes used her new authority to begin investigating Council security protocols on dozens of installations, each investigation providing resistance forces with detailed intelligence about defensive systems. Captain Chen's counterinsurgency operations involved training local resistance cells in advanced combat techniques while appearing to hunt them down. Master Chief Rodriguez's security audits systematically compromised Council fleet communications throughout the border regions. Within 72 hours, the galaxy's balance of power had shifted dramatically. The Council still possessed overwhelming military superiority, but their command and control systems had been compromised, their strategic communications were being monitored, and their most critical installations were vulnerable to coordinated attack. More significantly, resistance movements throughout Council territory were now equipped with advanced technology, coordinated through quantum communication networks, and trained in tactics that the Council had never encountered. Admiral Kethvar stood in his command center, studying reports that made less sense with each passing hour. Council forces were winning every engagement against resistance activities, but somehow the resistance appeared to be growing stronger. Security systems were functioning normally, but critical information was somehow reaching resistance networks. Human volunteers were proving invaluable for counterinsurgency operations, but insurgent activities were becoming more sophisticated rather than declining. Sir, Commander Zelix approached hesitantly. I've been analyzing the pattern of resistance activities. They appear to be coordinated by an intelligence network with capabilities that exceed our current threat assessments. Explain. Sir, the resistance is demonstrating tactical knowledge of our operations, technological capabilities that match or exceed our own, and most disturbing of all, they seem to understand our command structure better than some of our own officers. Kefvar studied the tactical displays, finally beginning to understand the scope of what was happening. Commander, I want a complete security audit of all human personnel. Full monitoring, complete surveillance, and detailed analysis of their activities. Sir, that will require authorization from the High Council. Human forces currently operate under emergency protocols that exempt them from routine surveillance. The Admiral realized that the humans had maneuvered themselves into a position where investigating them would require going through bureaucratic channels that could take weeks. Meanwhile, every day that passed gave them more opportunities to expand their operations. Send the request immediately, but Kethvar suspected that even if the High Council approved the investigation, it might already be too late. The humans had been given 8 months to establish themselves throughout Council territory, and they had used that time more effectively than anyone had imagined possible. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had not sent warriors to serve the Council. They had sent the most dangerous weapon Earth possessed, human intelligence applied to the problem of warfare. The High Council chambers on the capital world of Centraxes had not seen such chaos in over 1,000 years. Representatives from 17 different species shouted accusations and demands in a dozen languages as reports of simultaneous resistance activities poured in from across Council territory. Order! High Councillor Vexthalen's voice boomed through the chamber's amplification systems. We will address this crisis systematically. Admiral Kefar stood before the assembly, his career and possibly his life hanging in the balance. In the 72 hours since granting humans emergency operational authority, his command sector had experienced more resistance activity than in the previous decade combined. Admiral, explain how a primitive species that we discovered less than 1 standard year ago has apparently compromised our security throughout the galaxy. Vexthalen demanded. High Councillor, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood what we encountered on Earth. Kefar replied carefully. These are not primitive warriors. They are something far more dangerous. The chamber fell silent as the Admiral activated holographic displays showing the scope of coordinated resistance activities. Manufacturing facilities sabotaged simultaneously across 40 systems, communication nodes compromised with surgical precision. Fleet movements predicted and countered before orders were even transmitted to field commanders. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our threat assessments by several orders of magnitude. HFY continued. They appear to have established an intelligence network that spans our entire territory, using technologies that our sensors cannot detect. Councillor Zarthek of the Military Oversight Committee leaned forward. Are you suggesting that 50 humans have managed to compromise an empire that spans 3,000 star systems? I am suggesting that we have been fighting the wrong war, Councillor. While we focused on their combat capabilities, they were systematically mapping our weaknesses, establishing contacts with resistance movements, and preparing for coordinated action that we never anticipated. Meanwhile, in a secure facility 3 levels below the Pentagon, Colonel Kane was watching the same Council emergency session through intercepted communication feeds. The quantum monitoring devices installed by human operatives had given Earth complete access to Council high-level communications. Sir, Phoenix assets report mission completion across all primary objectives, Major Chen reported. Council command and control is fragmenting as planned. Kane studied the strategic displays showing resistance activities throughout Council territory. Every operation was proceeding exactly as designed, but he felt no satisfaction. The easy part was over. Now came the real war. What's the status on the Altarian Republic? Full integration complete, sir. They've received technology packages and are beginning coordinated operations with 17 other independent systems. Staff Sergeant Reyes reports that they're ready to begin Phase 3. Phase 3 was the transition from covert operations to open warfare. For months, human operatives had been building a coalition of resistance movements, independent systems, and dissatisfied council members. The network now spanned hundreds of star systems and included species with capabilities the council had never suspected. Sir, came a priority transmission from Captain Chen on Nexus Prime. Council forces are beginning to suspect coordinated human involvement. Request permission to implement Revelation Protocol. Kane had hoped they would have more time before the Council realized what was happening, but the timeline was still within acceptable parameters. All Phoenix assets, you are authorized for Revelation Protocol. Execute immediately. Across the galaxy, 49 human operatives received orders that would end their masquerade forever. Staff Sergeant Diana Reyes stood in the command center of an Altarian resistance base, surrounded by alien allies who had spent months learning to trust the strange humans who had brought them advanced weapons and impossible intelligence about Council operations. All stations, this is Phoenix Lead. She transmitted on frequencies that would ensure Council interception. Prometheus Protocol is complete. Beginning Revelation. She turned to the Altarian commander, Valnek, who had become both ally and friend during their months of coordination. It's time to show them what we've really been doing. The resistance base erupted into coordinated activity as forces that had been hidden and dispersed suddenly revealed themselves. Advanced fighters powered by human-modified engines launched from concealed hangars. Weapons systems based on Earth technology emerged from camouflaged positions. Most significantly, quantum communication arrays activated simultaneously across dozens of star systems. Aboard his flagship, Admiral HFY watched in horror as his tactical displays lit up with resistance activities in over 200 systems simultaneously. But these weren't the scattered, poorly equipped resistance cells that the Council had been fighting for centuries. These were coordinated forces using advanced technology and demonstrating tactical sophistication that exceeded anything in Council databases. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the human operatives, his communications officer reported with visible confusion. They're not requesting extraction or reporting mission status, they're issuing demands. Patch them through. Staff Sergeant Reyes' voice came through clearly on all Council frequencies. Admiral HFY, this is Phoenix Lead. We're transmitting on open channels to ensure all Council forces receive this message. Sergeant, explain your actions immediately. Sir, my actions are entirely consistent with the mission parameters Earth accepted when we agreed to provide warriors for Council service. You wanted to see what human warriors could accomplish. We've been showing you. Captain Chen's voice joined the transmission from Nexus Prime. Admiral, the manufacturing facilities we sabotaged produced weapons used to suppress free peoples throughout the galaxy. Destroying them was entirely consistent with human military ethics. Master Chief Rodriguez transmitted from her position aboard a Council fleet vessel that was now completely under Resistance control. Sir, the fleet elements we've captured were en route to attack civilian populations. Preventing that attack was a moral imperative. Kethvar realized with growing horror that the humans had used the Council's own authorization to systematically dismantle their empire while appearing to serve it. Every action had been technically within their granted authority, but the cumulative effect was devastating. "You've betrayed the Council's trust," he transmitted. "Admiral," Reyes replied, "we've done exactly what we said we would do. We represented Earth's interests, served with honor, and protected innocent populations from aggression. The fact that this conflicts with Council objectives suggests the problem is with Council objectives, not human actions." The transmission that followed was broadcast simultaneously to every system in Council territory, translated into hundreds of languages, and received by billions of beings who had lived under Council rule for generations. "Citizens of the galaxy," the collective human voices transmitted. "For 3,000 years, the Council has maintained order through fear and force. Today, that ends. The resistance movements you've heard whispered about in secret are real, they are coordinated, and they are equipped with technology that makes Council supremacy obsolete. Freedom is not a privilege granted by the powerful. It is a right inherent to all conscious beings. Today, that right is being restored to every world, every species, and every individual who chooses to claim it." The message concluded with technical specifications for quantum communication arrays, shield-penetrating weapons, and defensive systems that would allow any world to resist Council retaliation. More importantly, it included contact protocols for joining the coordinated resistance network that now spanned the galaxy. In the High Council chambers, panic erupted as representatives realized that their authority was evaporating in real time. Worlds throughout the galaxy were declaring independence. Resistance cells were emerging from hiding, and Council forces were discovering that their technological advantages had been neutralized. "Admiral Kethvar." High Councilor Vex Dalan's voice crackled with fury. "You will immediately destroy the human homeworld and eliminate all human personnel in Council service. High Councilor, our forces are engaged in suppressing resistance activities in over 300 systems. We cannot spare the resources for a strike on Earth." "Then make the resources available." But Kethvar was studying tactical reports that made such orders impossible to execute. Council fleets throughout the galaxy were reporting equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and in some cases, outright mutiny by conscripted species who had been secretly organizing for decades. "High Councilor, I regret to report that we no longer possess the capability for coordinated large-scale operations. Our command structure has been compromised, our communications are being monitored, and our forces are engaged in defensive actions throughout our territory." The truth was even worse than Kethvar realized. The humans hadn't simply organized resistance movements. They had created a new kind of warfare that the Council was psychologically and organizationally unable to counter. Instead of seeking to defeat Council forces in direct combat, they had made Council control impossible to maintain. On Earth, Colonel Kane watched the reports with mixed satisfaction and concern. The operation had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections, but success brought new challenges.
Sir, we're receiving communications from over 800 independent systems requesting alliance with Earth,
Major Chen reported. The resistance networks are asking for formal recognition and continued support. Kane nodded. The easy part had been destroying the Council's empire. The difficult part would be helping to build something better in its place. Draft a response establishing the Galactic Freedom Alliance. Earth will serve as coordinator, but decision-making authority will be distributed among all member systems. No more empires. Sir, the Council still has significant military assets. They could attempt to retake lost territory. Let them try, Kane replied. The galaxy has learned what human warriors can accomplish when they're fighting for something they believe in. The Council wanted predators. They got something much worse. They got humans who refuse to be prey. Admiral Kethvar stood in his command center, watching the collapse of an empire that had stood for 3 millennia. The humans had accomplished something that no Council strategist had ever considered possible. They had made the galaxy ungovernable for tyrants. The final transmission from the human operatives was broadcast from coordinates throughout Council territory, delivered by voices that had become familiar to resistance fighters across the galaxy. To all free peoples of the galaxy, the war for independence has begun, but it will not be won through conquest or domination. It will be won by proving that free societies are stronger, more innovative, and more resilient than authoritarian empires. Today, we stop running from tyrants. Today, we teach them to run from us. The message concluded with coordinates for rally points where refugee populations could find sanctuary, technical specifications for establishing defensive systems, and most importantly, an invitation to join a growing alliance of worlds committed to mutual defense and shared prosperity. The Council had demanded warriors from humanity, believing they would gain useful shock troops for their continuing expansion. Instead, they had awakened something that would eventually consume their empire and liberate the galaxy. The humans had delivered exactly what they promised. Warriors who would represent Earth's values and serve with honor. The fact that those values included freedom, justice, and the absolute refusal to kneel to tyrants had apparently not been considered by their would-be masters. As the first year of the Galactic Freedom Alliance began, species throughout the galaxy discovered what humans had always known. The most dangerous predator is one that hunts for justice rather than survival. The Council's empire was finished. The Age of Freedom had begun, and humanity had proven that sometimes the best way to serve as warriors is to teach others how to fight for themselves.